Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Iress's live stream on the future active release. We'll just give it a few seconds more to try and make sure everybody has joined who wants to before we kick off. Right, we've got a decent number of attendees. Thank you all very much for joining our live stream on the future of Vector release. I would also like to thank our partners, Just, Pure Retirement and More to Life, and I'll just let each of the gentlemen introduce themselves briefly, and starting with Jonathan.
That's the famous phrase from 2020, isn't it? You're on mute, so apologies. My name's Jonathan McCaffrey, here from Just. I'm a specialist account director.
Thank you, Jonathan. Chris?
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jonathan. Morning, everyone. I think this is the biggest audience I've ever presented to, and I'm sat in my office. So I'm head of intermediary sales here at Pure Retirement, and really excited to support Iress on this event and speaking to all, interested parties about equity release and the issues we faced this year and moving forward, what exciting opportunities there is.
Thanks, Chris. And finally, Stuart.
Sorry, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Excellent. My internet connection went a bit unstable there. Good morning, everyone. My name's Stuart Wilson. I'm the Corporate Marketing Director at More to Life, and just echoing what Chris said, they're delighted to be joining with Iress today to talk about this important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. And for everybody else, I'm Dave Miller. I'm Executive General Manager for the Sourcing Division in Iress, and really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. We've got over 300 attendees on the live stream, so looking forward to a good chat and session with our partners. Little bit of housekeeping for those of you who are watching live. If you have a burning question, there is a chat function. If you could include your name and company, that would be really appreciated. Any questions that we don't answer today, we will indeed answer and get back to you. So yeah, please feel free to fire away. Looking to start, first question then I'm going to pose to Stuart. Obviously, it would only be right to talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic, and interested, Stuart, in what are the biggest challenges you've seen for your organisation since both lockdown one and I suppose the very current lockdown that we are in at the moment, and how you've adapted to what is an ever-changing situation.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. Once again, yeah, excellent question. I think way back at the sort of middle of March, towards the end of March, as we were heading into lockdown, that was a very uncertain time for everyone, no matter what industry you're in. I think for us, as a lender in the market and as part of the wider equity release market, I think we're all scratching our heads a little bit on the 24th of March, wondering how we would move the industry forward, an industry that relies so heavily on face-to-face for everything, face-to-face advice, a valuer in a client's home, valuing a property, legal advice that requires face-to-face meetings and wet signatures on pieces of paper. The way that we adapted was in a number of ways. Firstly, we were very quickly able to get all of our staff working from home, and the technology was there to do that. I think we're very fortunate that several years earlier, More to Life had invested heavily in online technology that meant we could continue to process applications remotely, online signatureless applications we've been doing for a number of years now. So all of that process of new business could continue. We worked very hard, of course, with our funding partners to deliver a remote valuation process into this market. I don't think we should underestimate just how difficult that was for not just for More to Life, but this entire industry. Remote valuations were not a thing on the 24th of March, and by the 1st of April they were a thing, just a week later. for Water Life at least. And I think that was a huge undertaking and not a small victory by any stretch of the imagination. And then I think the third thing that we did and continue to do is make sure that we are communicating with advisors. I think it was really important, especially in those early days, to keep advisors updated, even if the news was there is no news, because I think advisors were just hungry to know what was going on, how new business was going to be processed, what restrictions or retentions were going to be in place, what products would still be available or perhaps being taken off the shelf. And we did see quite a number of products removed from the market in April and May. So it was a combination, I suppose, of determination to keep the wheels turning, the deployment of technology or the continuing deployment of technology, and communication with advisors to ensure that everyone understood exactly how to continue to do business.
Excellent. Okay. And Chris, anything further to add from a pure perspective?
Yeah, I think I'd approach it in a slightly different angle to what Stuart's done, in that I think probably what this hasn't told me, because I knew it already, is that in any business, certainly in our business, our people are our most valuable asset, and without our people, we wouldn't be able to provide the service we do to our customers, which are our advisors and the end consumer. So for me, I think it'd be remiss of not to acknowledge how difficult it has been for everyone to move to a remote way of working. Not just, how do we get used to the new technology, but how do we get used to not interacting, in an office, seeing people day to day. If we look at, the sales team that obviously I run, we used to having BDMs who would be out there presenting at events, seeing people, spending a lot of life on the road. When you suddenly say to those people who are, people that like interaction with people, that you need to transition from that's a job you signed up to do to really completely doing a different job overnight, it's not been easy, and being able to offer that support to our staff. Touching on the one thing I will absolutely agree with Stuart on is about that communication. So the internal communication that we've had to our staff, I think what's really got us through this difficult time is that we've supported our staff. We've known that we've been able to offer them. And I think we were talking just before we went live, Dave, in how this second lockdown is really hitting people that bit harder, because it's not summer anymore. They've not got those summer evenings you can go out for a walk. It's dark when you wake up, it's dark when you finish work, and it's really making sure that you support the staff, because both myself and Pure firmly believe that if you look after your staff now during these tough times, they will remember it and it will create that goodwill. And I think also your customers, they see that. So when they're interacting with our staff, we want to make sure they can be as comfortable as they can be. So I think there's been a lot of work that we've done, a lot of resilience training we've helped our staff with, so then we can help our end customers.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think they're both some really, really good points. I think just going back over some of the points that Stuart covered off as well. I think that the first shutdown had a profound impact on the market. Everything shut, and that included the land registries across the country. I think there are certain businesses out there that are part of the value chain for lifetime mortgages, so solicitor firms especially, that still haven't recovered from the first lockdown, when they furloughed a large number of staff and they haven't really caught up with the backlog. And that's having an impact today still on completions of cases. And I'm sure those thoughts would be echoed across different distribution businesses. I think when we look at the second lockdown, the other thing that happened in lockdown one was a really substantial amount of furloughing of staff. And that really hit distribution capacity. And that message to the customer that wasn't necessarily getting through and keeping them informed. And that did create some real service challenges for us. But absolutely, just don't just lend in our own name. We also fund other lenders, and we stood absolutely behind the market in terms of helping the market continue to lend to complete cases. So taking the risk that on the land registry that the property would be registered later when they reopened, and that was a really important move. And I think the reality is, for the industry, we've all made across different businesses, we've made small incremental steps as an industry that have really helped keep the market going. And I'm absolutely delighted in terms of what we were able to achieve in really short notice to get all of our team working from home. So across the Just Group, there's 1,100 people. We got them all working from home and up and running on a Just VPN by the end of the first week of lockdown, which was quite remarkable. We had a few bits of good fortune in there, but they do say that you can make your luck as well. And as a business, I think what we have seen is absolutely, just echoing Chris's words, you know, we've seen our staff cope really, really well, especially in the first lockdown because of the added pressure of childcare. What it has opened to us, I think, and I think this is really important for the future, is that it's shown how much we can trust our staff and our people, and allow things that in the past would have been really challenging, like different ways of working, you know, where for example, women have gone away and have children coming back into the workforce. We can see by the evidence of what's happened that absolutely that works for our business. So I think massive positives from us, but absolutely echo the points from both Chris and Stuart that it's presented real challenges in terms of how people can cope psychologically, being in this working at home, living at home, and not really having much interaction apart from at work with other people.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And Jonathan, yeah, I think from an Iress perspective, would wholeheartedly agree with an awful lot of that. I think, you know, people particularly are the most important thing in any business, and I think we are very fortunate how everybody has adapted. And I think the point Chris made about this second lockdown, where you get up in the dark, you don't finish work until it's dark. It's absolutely key that people find some time to get out in the fresh air during the day. Not least of which just to try and keep as level-headed as possible. Anyway, that's excellent first question. So moving on. So Chris, during lockdown, have you seen any way in which advisors have started to use technology differently, and or consumers, and any impact from a business point of view that you've seen?
Again, really good question. I think, you know, if you'd have said to someone this time last year, Zoom, they'd have gone, scratched their head for a bit and wondered what it was. I think, you know, the buzzwords of the year, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, you know, as Jonathan said, you know, you're on mute has become, you know, an often phrase 2 or 3 times a day. So I think, you know, in terms of that, I think certainly I speak from my perspective as a business. I think it was very much that we'd only really do a virtual event if that was worst case scenario. I think certainly from a lender's point of view, there's a lot of learns we can take from this. You know, doing virtual events, you don't have to pay for the higher events rooms. You don't have to worry if no one turns up that much, because you can just hide who's attending online. In terms of engagement with advisors, you know, whilst, you know, the industry has moved on, I think it would be remiss of me to say, I think a lot of the focus in these 9 months is just staying afloat in terms of, you know, let's really focus on, you know, what Stuart said, delivering, you know, the remote valuations. He said, you know, as I think there weren't a thing at the start of the year, and transition into that. Technology will become more and more. Everyone's now advising remotely, so they're having to use, you know, a lot of people who would have said, you know, I have to do it, have to see customers face to face. They're probably now thinking, well, actually, yeah, it's still good. However, I can get used to this technology. I can still see the whites of their eyes over that. And in terms of specifically regarding, you know, the sourcing of plans, I think because things change so quickly, you know, having such platforms like Iress where they can get up-to-date information on the products when things were changing on such a consistent basis, I think that's the real bit that we've really come to the forefront and really, you know, made certain grounds against other areas of financial services where maybe we'd been behind the times somewhat, is that advisors knew they could go to and get the most up-to-date information on what plans were available, especially when lockdown first hit. and there was a lot of lenders that were removing plans from the market. Advisors needed to be able to go somewhere where they could get all the information in one place. And I think your third parties like yourself have been great in doing that. And also the mention of the integration that both, obviously, all three companies on the call have done with yourselves, making sure that advisors, I think we're trying to get away from all this rekeying and repeat keying and trying to get the information correct first time round. And the work that we've done with yourselves, you've really been at the forefront in doing that. I remember us, probably the four of us and other lenders meeting well over a year ago, trying to really, scratching our heads going, how do we make life easier for advisors? I think we started that journey. I don't think we're there yet. Yeah. And I think, as a whole, our industry is growing up and the technology plays a big part in doing so.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Jonathan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I echo those points about video conferencing. The thing that we didn't know that we needed to know in 2020. So yeah, I have to admit, I mean, my role involves presenting a lot face to face and to audiences. So this is an unusual situation to have such a big audience and not be able to see anyone. But really delighted at the opportunity. I think with certainly with Just, it has propelled a number of changes that we wanted to do anyway. So we wanted to automate. We wanted to make the journey much easier for customers, for advisors, for the whole value chain. And we had an ongoing investment project before the pandemic began. What the pandemic did is it brought those plans forward. Things that for us, we had perhaps scratched our heads on perhaps too long, things like online signatures. We were able to agree over as a business to make some substantial commercial changes, in some cases over the weekend. And so we moved at remarkable pace. What it has shown the business is that we can really, when we need to do something, we can really do it, which has created, I suppose, a momentum in Just, and I've certainly seen that in other businesses in the market as well, where what the pandemic has done is it's sort of instilled a dynamism in the business that we just, obviously that part of that is survival, but it's also there's that momentum now behind improving the whole journey for the customer, and I'd absolutely echo what Chris was saying around integrations with Iress and with other portals. We really want to be in a position where, however the advisor works, they can integrate and they can work with Just in a way that suits them. And so that's really important for us.
Okay, thanks. Stuart?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what's just been said. I mean, interestingly, back end of the summer, we did a survey with advisors on the impact of COVID on their business. Got an unbelievable response. Had over 350 advisors respond, which for a survey is pretty good, just off our own database, and got some fascinating insights there into the advisor behavior and attitudes and how they were feeling about COVID. Some of the things that they said, just picking out some of the statistics there, when we asked about how COVID had impacted their business, 26% of those people said that they'd started delivering advice over the phone, which is something they'd never done before. And perhaps not unsurprisingly, but still, shouldn't be underestimated or overlooked in terms of the impact this had. 43% said they'd been using video, which is something they'd never done before. To echo what Chris just said a moment ago about, who of us knew what Zoom was a year ago. And looking forward, when we asked them, well, what lessons do you think the industry will learn out of all of this? More than half, 56%, said they believe that this industry would find a way to rely less on paper and far more on technology. So I think advisors are already looking to a brighter future of a greater use of technology. Even if COVID disappeared tomorrow, I think many of the advisors who were not using phone and video technology will continue to do so. Perhaps not to quite the extent they're doing it now, but I think what advisors have recognised is that more clients than perhaps we gave them credit for are quite happy to use that kind of technology. And sort of following what Jonathan said, I think same for More to Life. I think this pandemic also spurred on some things that were already in train with More to Life, but just accelerated them. So the deployment of robot technology, for example, which is speeding up some of the back office systems, that some of the mundane things, like the production of annual statements and things. We've done more of that over the last few months to free up more of our staff's time to deal with the volumes and the challenges that COVID continues to bring. So technology is definitely playing a big part in the way that we are continuing to face into this industry. But even beyond the other side of this pandemic, and let's keep fingers crossed on all of the vaccines that have been talked about in the last couple of weeks, I think it will continue to go from strength to strength.
Okay, great. So I would hope as we move forward and as we come out the other side that companies continue to make decisions quickly, and rather than as we've seen in many times take a long time to actually make a decision that was the one they were going to do in the first place. And hopefully as you've all seen, you've benefited from actually that being much more fleet of foot than previously. And Jonathan, coming back to that technology question, how do you think it compares in the equity release market to other sectors, and what impact does that have on both advisors and the end consumers?
Yeah, I think what for me, what services has changed. So and it's changed quite fundamentally, and it's happened during my career in financial services. Where we were in a position back at the end of the last century where what service was almost like it was a promise to deliver, and as long as you set your expectations and you delivered on the time that you said, then that was accepted as the service level that was agreed. So all of that has changed with the internet. So we're in a situation today, and I could pick up my phone and I could order something and it could arrive in my property tomorrow, and that level of speed of service, and I can track where it is from the warehouse to my property, and I can see the whole journey. And the distributor on their side, they also have an equal record of who's buying, when they're buying, and when they expect that product to arrive, and when the deliveries happened. And that whole speed and interconnectivity of the different component parts of what seemed like a relatively straightforward journey. So me buying something from the internet is involving many different businesses. And what we're looking to do, I suppose, in lifetime mortgages, and certainly what we're doing here at Just, is we're bringing all of those aspects together so that the whole journey works for all of the different participants. The first stage of that for us was partnering with yourselves, Dave, with the online integration with Iress. We've got other portal integrations coming this year, and we've got our own broker portal coming this year as well. All of which is around creating a situation where people, irrespective of how they're using their technology, can work with providers, work with lenders as they choose. Now, one of the things that Chris mentioned earlier, I think is really important, and it's this thing about rekeying information. And it is one of the things that we've gathered when we've done our user journey experience testing before we began our journey. And what we discovered was that advisors are really frustrated, even where there are online systems, to have to continually rekey information all the time. Massively frustrating, massively time consuming. I also feel for advisors as well, where they're in a situation where different people who work on cases perhaps don't have the right access rights. So for example, an administrator has to pretend to be an advisor to access a customer record. And I think there's work we can do there to improve that experience for different people who work in businesses. We need to tie in third parties, and third parties for us at Just. We've got our own solicitor firm in Act that we work with. We've also got the customer's own choice of solicitor that they need to interact with us, and can we automate that journey? We need to look at the valuers reports, making sure that they're accessible. And then when the whole journey, if you like, is online, allowing a view for the customer, potentially our future customer, some access that allows a view for the broker to keep that customer informed, and later for the customer to continue to manage their own case later into retirement. I think the thing that certainly there is work for us to do across the value chain to support advisors to improve the journey. I think there's a lot of work underway at the moment. It was really interesting to hear some of the comments from Stuart earlier. I think we're looking at the same kind of technology in our business. I think we came to the technology piece relatively late for this market, although we're one of the longest lenders in the marketplace. We've come to the IT journey relatively late, but we are planning to hopefully catch up and maybe, I would hope, be ahead of the competition by the middle of next year. But we'll see. So it's a big objective. So hopefully,
I'm sure Stuart or Chris will have something to say about that, gentlemen.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. My internet connection was a little bit unstable there, but yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Jonathan just said. I think I came into this market 2014, and I think from a technology perspective, we were quite a long way behind the curve of other markets. You know, paper was still dominating. There were really very few lenders, if any, that were offering kind of online, or certainly not end-to-end online services. That has changed dramatically, and certainly signatureless applications, online portals are now more the norm. It's so critically important, I think, to pick up on a point Chris made a little while ago. I mean, just look at the way in which the market has moved very rapidly through coronavirus. At the beginning of April, there were something like 440 odd product options on the market. A month later, that had dropped 25% as products were removed. It's so important that those sourcing tools are accessible, they're linked up, that advisors have got their finger on the pulse of what's going on if they're making recommendations to clients. So we've got lots of improvements going on, but to Jonathan's point, I suppose it's now about sort of connecting up that end-to-end journey and making sure that advisors and their clients can see all of the elements of that journey, and we speed up, because I think from getting from application to offer, we're now, as an industry, we've made huge improvements. I think more to life, the fastest one we've done is just a couple of hours. You can do it that quickly now, but still progressing on beyond offer to completion can still take a long time as we churn through paper processes or bits of technology that are not connected. So there's still some way to go, but I think certainly the industry is in a much better place than it was. So from a position where it was probably behind the curve, I'd say in certain areas now we're probably ahead of other markets like resi markets, etc. Chris?
Yeah, not to sound boring or like a broken record, but to agree with what Jonathan and Stuart have said. I usually like to try and disagree, but I can't. I think we're all in a similar position. I think probably the bit that to focus on is here at PR, we've done a lot of work on technology. I think that's a focus of ours. I think the bit that we've really been mindful of that we can only be as good as our weakest part. And I'm not saying that any part is weaker than others, but I think a lot of work we've done, and Stuart touched upon it, is trying to work with our third parties, because a lot of the internal stuff, get in the case to an offer, we can control a lot of that, but I think it's working with all of the third parties throughout the process to get everyone to a standard across the industry. Again, I think each lender goes off and does their own little thing, which is absolutely right, but I think that the part that Iress are playing this needs mentioning, that Dave, you're bringing everyone round a table to try and bring some consistency across the market. And I really think that's where we'll get to, is there's no point in just one lender trailblazing and going in technology if everyone else doesn't join that journey. Yeah. Because, we don't just want one outlier to have the best technology and everyone else. We want as an industry, and it may take us that bit longer, and we probably are seeing it is taking us that bit longer, but I think all the work that is going on behind the scenes that Iress are doing, getting everyone to a point where there's a consistency in what questions we ask, how we source. And it just goes back to that thing I said maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. It's getting the right results and the right advice the first time. And that's the real critical point, is, going back to, when I was advising more over 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of having to rerun things, re-enter information. I think, our industry is growing up. We're still way behind the mortgage market, but we're still only a fraction of the size of that. So it doesn't have the interest and the investment that some of the other industries do. And as we're bringing new advisors into this market and highlighting these opportunities, we've got a responsibility to those that make sure when they come into our marketplace, they don't think, well, why am I bothering doing this? Because, you know, it's nowhere near as good as what they're used to in other areas, maybe in more normal residential mortgages or IFAs. So I think we're getting there. You know, let's remember it was only 5-6 years ago our industry was only doing £1 billion worth of lending a year. You know, that's more than quadrupled. But I think, again, I don't want to sound like a cliche, we all need to get on this journey together, and we are doing, and we are making great progress in that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'd certainly echo the fact that, moving the industry forward, and certainly the work we've done with the three of you on real-time quotations and the ability for advisors to get key features illustrations has been very successful. But it only really works when everybody has adopted the technology from a lender perspective. Agree with your point that in comparing to the mortgage market, there is certain aspects where equity release is behind the curve, but actually real-time quotations is ahead. There isn't real-time quotations yet in the mainstream mortgage market, so equity release is a step forward there. So I think it's important that working as an industry, but each of us, particularly from a lender perspective, trying to make sure you're keeping your competitive edge. But for Iress, working with everybody, I think just drives everything forward, and I think it's really important we continue to do that. So just looking at that, and we've talked about the differences, but are there one or two things that you really think will start to make a major difference for advisors and consumers from a technology or an initiative perspective over the next 12-18 months? Don't know who wants to take that first.
I'm happy to field that one. I think, first of all, I think the next 12 months is going to be a bit of consolidation in terms of getting back to the normal way of life. But I think the technology is here to stay, and I think the real part that technology will play is, hopefully we'll see we've done the first step in terms of returning real life quotes. We need to get to that point where it's an end-to-end hub. So you do a quotation, it returns a KFI, and then once the customer's happy, you can then proceed to application. And then I think it will be the work behind the scenes to get the cash to customers, as quickly as they need it. Some need it quicker than others, and it's just working through that whole process to ensure that a customer isn't waiting and an advisor isn't waiting for the information that they need. And then in terms of the sourcing and returning it, I think we'll see new entrants into the marketplace. I think we'll see innovation. And I think that we really need technology to help bridge the gap between later life lending and RIOs and traditional mortgages. At the minute, there isn't a panacea where you can go and you can sort through all the free products in one way. I'm not sure you'll ever get to that, but I think at the minute we're still working silos, and I think technology plays a big part in making sure that if you're an advisor, if you're an equity release advisor, if you're a mortgage advisor, if you're an IFA, I think that probably at the minute different people use different tools which might create different outcomes. I think as an industry we need to get to a point where it doesn't matter what type of advisor you visit in the later life journey, the outcomes are more or less the same, and the sourcing tools and the technology helps create that synergy.
Okay, thanks. Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree. Automation is quite an interesting part of the journey. I'm not going to cover off the parts of Chris has just said, because I agree with them. So I think I'll try and talk about a slightly different part of the journey, which is after the customer's written the case, and when the customer's with a lender, they then we find from our experience, and Just have been in the market since 2005, so we've got quite a long experience of being in the market. They often come back for further lending, and what we did in 2019 was we introduced a new interest serviced lifetime mortgage as well, And on the basis of just those two elements, so relatively straightforward elements, we find actually there's a need now for customers to be able to manage their own cases and for advisors to monitor what's happening. We've long had a little bit of a challenge with lifetime mortgages where a customer would agree to a plan, so particularly on a drawdown, and then within a year they've used up all of that facility, but it wasn't in that original plan. So how do we create the ability for the advisor to have an ongoing value add of their advice? And that's a question, I suppose, for all of us in the industry. How do we keep the advisor engaged with their client, keep them involved in the journey, and if there's a later need that perhaps was unforeseen at the start, because we're dealing with customers that this could be a 30 or 40 year journey for them with a lifetime mortgage. Of course, their needs are going to change. How are we going to be able to adapt to those needs as they go forward?
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Stuart.
I agree with that. I think for me, that's one of the most important next steps in developments of technology. If you look at the way, I mean, the equity release market has evolved so quickly and grown up very quickly into a much more sophisticated financial planning tool. It's now being woven in to mainstream holistic financial planning for a wide variety of clients. This is no longer, Mrs. Miggins in her 80s just taking out a little lump sum to see her through her final years. This is being used by all sorts of people for gifting, for taxation, for or tax strategies. It's being used as part of retirement planning to bridge income gaps in retirement. It's being used by a wide variety of clients and their advisors. If we look at things like repayment options on equity release, which have become hugely popular over the last couple of years, and more customers now want that ability to manage their debt more effectively. More and more customers are using drawdown facilities, repayment facilities, interest service facilities. And I think, as Jonathan's kind of alluded to there, the ability or the functionality to allow clients to much
and there's technology working to a trade
is absolutely critical. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Couple of questions, one that I got prepared and one from that I'll combine with a question from Christopher Epps, who's one of the attendees. So obviously we've got interest rates at absolute all-time low at 0.1% at the minute. Market expectation is that it will stay at this level well into 2021 and maybe beyond. So what impact do you foresee on the equity release market, particularly given that the number of plans taken out in Q2 were the lowest seen in any quarter in the last 4 years? And adding Christopher's question where, going back a few years, there was a lot of over-lending and contracts favouring lenders and poor client outcomes. How do we ensure we protect against that in the future?
Happy to take that one. Oh, there's quite a few questions there, Dave. I would probably go into, I've stopped trying to predict what will happen with interest rates. I remember when I was advising, sat with a client saying, if a rate started with a 5, that's never been seen before. So I think it's a dangerous game for anyone to start predicting what will happen with interest rates. Obviously, the further down they go, the more difficult it is for them to reduce. We've seen this only this week in the market that interest rates have gone up slightly, and that's just to do with the cost of the borrowing, how funders fund these types of products. Then touching on your point with regards to, we're concerned about some unfavourable contracts back in the day. I think, I'd be lying if I said that some of the plans we've seen in the past, they didn't create good customer outcomes, and I think we've learned from that. We've learned from, what was SHIP, and before that, so what was the Equities Council before that was SHIP, in that, that we've now got some safeguards in place for our customers. And I think, you mentioned interest rates. That's the key driver for, how the debt accumulates. And this is why the market's opening up, because interest rates are low. If you looked at 6-7 years with an interest rate of 6.5%, 7%, which was standard, fairly commonplace, that debt would double about every 10 years. We're now looking at interest rates now where the debt doubles anywhere between every 25 and 30 years. So it's creating better customer outcomes. And of course, that's not even factoring in the increased flexibility, that these plans offer. I think as an industry, we've been beaten by the stick of years gone by. I think we are growing up. We are extremely conscious about consumer outcomes and disclosure with that. So I think we are doing a lot, and the flexibility that we add into these, it does make it now that they are now being built for the consumer in mind, and their changing circumstances through life. So again, whilst interest rates are important, that's not always, if it was just the case that the lowest interest rate got all the business, then there'd probably only be one or two lenders in the marketplace. It's the job of the majority of people on this call today as advisors to look at customer circumstances. Will they be able to repay the plan? Do they want to be able to move it? So it's all these features that as lenders we're all bringing to the market that make it a product that's fit for purpose for the customer now, but also for their changing needs in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chris is spot on. I think we are now in a market where rates have reduced drastically in the last few years, and we're at record lows. The vaccine news has had a fantastic impact on the stock markets, and that's affected long-dated interest rates, and that's had an impact on short-term rate movements over the last few days. And wouldn't be surprised to see some more creeping upwards of interest rates over the next few weeks and months. But nevertheless, we're in a very different position to where we were a few years ago, and certainly I think long gone are the days where people could just sneer at equity release as being an expensive way to borrow money. It's actually become a very cost-effective way of borrowing money. And to the previous point I was making around the greater sophistication of client uses of equity release, I think we are appealing to different customer categories now. And to Chris's point, that doesn't necessarily mean therefore that price is the most important thing. It's more about the features and the outcomes for the client, and the cheapest product in the market might not give the features and benefits that a client is looking for to deliver their particular needs. And so there's going to continue to be innovation across this space, from the products that are perhaps a little bit more expensive but are more feature rich, to those that offer the best rates but might have fewer features and options with them. So it's fantastic that we've got such a broad innovation now. We've gone from 5 years ago we had 20, 30 products in the market. Now we've got over 500. It's fantastic.
Okay, thanks. Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think echo those points. That this year, so in 2020, we've radically increased the number of products we have in the marketplace. Our pricing team have got always got their pencils poised, ready to sharpen them if we need to stay close to our competitors. I think it's absolutely for the benefit of customers that the market is so competitive, and obviously we're all on here today, and for the most part we agree on most of the points, but be under no illusions, we're all competing for those clients and trying to make sure that those customers are attracted to our propositions. So one of the things that Just have done this year is really broadened out the proposition. We were quite niche. I think it's fair to say a couple of years ago we focused on higher LTV lending. That has really broadened out quite substantially this year. We have, as a business, over 350 different variations of our product, which is split into 7 different types. So I do think, and it's just echoing some points from earlier on in terms of sourcing systems, for advisors to really understand the best possible outcome for the client and get that whole of market solution. I think they really do need sourcing systems like Iress to help them on that journey. For me, I think when we look forward and taking account of what the FCA said in the summer, the FCA did, if you like, put a little bit of a shot across the bow about advisors perhaps not paying enough attention to the suitability of the advice to the particular client, having suitability reports are too long, not personalising their advice, and not challenging customers. So when a customer comes to us and asks for X amount of money, what do you really need that for? And just talking through the sustainability of the plan and actually thinking, look, how long are you going to live, and how much time is the value of this money needing to last for your client? So those are really important challenges and some changes. And I think for Just as a business, we've been on this journey before with RDR. It seemed to me like the first shot across the bows that was sort of very reminiscent of when the FCA started the preparations for RDR a number of years ago. And I think advisors, we can definitely help advisors to go through that journey. There's bits and pieces that all of the businesses on this call can help with, I think. And certainly as a longevity specialist, as Just is, we think we could have some particular insight, but certainly I think there's definitely some food for thought for advisors going forward in this marketplace. In terms of where interest rates are going to be in a year's time, I have absolutely no idea. Just like Chris, I've watched. I'm a keen watcher of financial markets, of current affairs, and it's as likely that interest rates could go negative as could go up, and I have absolutely no idea. And then more quantitative easing always has a big impact on gilt yields, and so yeah, it's really, really unexpected times. Profound change is coming. You can feel it. And I suppose what we're all trying to be in this position to do is to try and help the advisors out there on this call help their customers. So I suppose that's the most important thing for all of us, really.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions I want to get through, conscious of time. First one, and I'll only pose this to one of you. So a question from Gregory Power, who references there are still a number of older style ER contracts out there, and what do we think the industry should be doing to address those, particularly where the lender, for example, isn't in existence anymore, i.e. Prudential. So Chris, can I throw that one at you, please?
Thanks for that question. I think we do have a responsibility of our industry to make sure that we remove that stigma. I think the Equity Release Council, one of the reasons they're around is to be a voice for the advisors, and obviously the advisors a voice for the customer. So I think the Equity Release Council do a lot of good work, lobbying, speaking, to a lot of these firms that maybe weren't around. I think what we're in control as a lender, we're probably only in control of our future. We can't really dictate our past. So, there's not much I can comment about, obviously, on what's gone is gone. And I think we just need to really focus on making sure that the products that we now deliver are meeting consumers' needs. I'm not sure if that's the best answer that was wanted, but that's the only one I can give.
Okay, I might have said a bit of a cop out, Chris, but yeah, I think it's maybe the Equity Release Council does need to have a look at some of those and determine is there something that could be done. But yeah, it could be quite a long process, I've no doubt. Question for Stuart from Jeff Lloyd of Informed IFA. So actually praising experience of Equity Release this year. Providers have done a great job, no doubt. Thank you for that, Jeff. The counter to that really is the legal side, where paraphrasing, obviously the furloughing of staff at the beginning and not bringing them back quickly enough has had a major impact. But do you think that maybe More to Life should be getting its own solicitor solution in-house? Stuart?
I think it's an interesting question and an interesting challenge. I think as a lender, we are always looking at ways in which we can improve the other side of the equation. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of work in terms of improving speed from application process and through to the offer stage. Once you get beyond offer, that's where things can sometimes slow down, not always, but that's typically the slowest part of the journey. And as a lender, we're looking at all sorts of ways and working with the existing sister panels that we use to look at increasing ways in which we can speed that process up, whether that's through technology, whether that's through better processes, better communication. So I think it's something that we will continue to look at as a lender, because it's an important part of the process. It's important that clients can get to the lending they need as quickly as they need to get to it. I think gone are the days, as I say, 4, 6, 7 years ago when I joined this industry, and it could take 3 or 4 months to go through that process. I think we're in a very different place now to where we were back then, but there are still efficiencies I think can be driven through the whole process. And as a lender, and I'm sure Pure and Just the same, looking at ways in which we can improve that through the legal conveyancing side as well.
Okay, thank you. And gentlemen, I'm just going to pose one very quick question to you before we wrap this up. One word to describe your view on the future of equity release. So, Jonathan.
I think it's really exciting.
Thank you.
What we've got coming up is very good.
Chris?
Oh, let Stuart go first. I need
Stuart.
One word, that's a challenge. I think, yeah, it's exponential, I think, is where it's going. I know we've been stalling over the last couple of years, and we'll probably end up this year roughly where we were last year. But I think once we get through this, we'll be back on a different growth curve.
Well, there you go, Chris. They've all used more than one word, so you now have more.
I think the word for me is maturing.
Nice. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to thank everybody who has spent their time this morning watching this live stream. We will be placing a recording of this and making it available very shortly. And as I said at the start, we'll also be sending a feedback request form out to those of you who've been attending, which we would greatly appreciate it being completed. There are a few questions which we didn't get to, so my apologies, and we will be answering those, and I will get input from the panel as well. And again, a big thank you for your attendance, and a special thank you to Waterlife, Pure and Just for this morning. Many thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.